Welcome again to this University of Chicago Career Month webinar, Strength, Strategy, Action. In this 1-hour webinar, we'll focus on strength-based leadership. Learn how you can identify and leverage your strengths, develop a strength-based plan, and evaluate yourself on the next and elevate yourself to the next level of performance. I'm really excited today to introduce our presenter, Tomer Yogev, who has an MBA from Booth. And he's also co-founder and executive coach of the firm TandemSpring, where he works with leading entrepreneurs and corporate investors on strength-based approaches to refine strategy, culture, operations, and leadership. Also, when I asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, he shared with me that as a kid he was a competitive classical pianist, which helped him type quickly and led to a career in tech. But like most confused teenagers, he was still convinced that he would be a doctor one day. So I couldn't be more excited for us to hear this wonderful presentation. So Tomer, whenever you're ready, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, I guess, to some folk. Really delighted to be here with you today to share about strengths-based leadership. Where I'd like to start, before we even get into any content at all, is to just take a second. I know a lot of people are doing a lot of things out there. You got your daily lives. You've chosen to spend some time here with me and with us today. I want to thank you again for that. But I want you to just take a moment, take a beat, and really try and be present for the next 50 minutes or so as we go through this content and talk about strength-based leadership. As you'll see, a lot of the work that we're going to talk about today fundamentally boils down to awareness. So what I'd like to do is take just a second for everyone to kind of put down the phone, close the email, whatever other things you're doing. I understand this is a lunchtime webinar for a lot of people, so if you still need to eat, that's perfectly okay. But just take a moment and be present to what we're going to be going through today, because you found it important enough to spend your time with us today around this. So just take that moment and take a breath. And with that, I'm also going to ask Rachel to start us off with our very first poll question. Again, before we get into any of the content, and that question for the poll, very simply, is scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing right now? It's actually a pretty decent weather day here in Chicago. We'll take it for this time of the year, that's for sure. Maybe that's influencing your number. Maybe your week is off to a good start. Maybe it isn't. But as you consider your score on a 1 to 10 scale, I also want to ask, what would it take to get you to a 10? Why aren't you at a 10 right now?
So I'm seeing that on a scale from 1 to 10, we have a lot of people who are between a 3 and a 5, maybe 39%.
Okay.
Between 6 and 7, 26%, 7 and 8, 22%, and only 13% are a 9 or a 10.
Okay.
On our poll.
It's a Tuesday, it's November. Well, the weather is good for Chicago in November. It's still not the greatest weather in the world, right? A lot of people are still eager for Thanksgiving and the holiday seasons to roll around. I can appreciate that. I'm glad to hear there aren't too many 1s and 2s out there. But curious to see what it would take to get to a 10. Now that could be literally anything. Now we've given you a couple of options there. When I've asked this question before, I've had people say, you know, I could just use a Coke. And I just need some caffeine and some sugar, and I'll be doing a whole lot better. That's the one thing I use is a couple of pennies for a Coca-Cola. And that's perfectly fine. There's no judgment of what it is. But I want to know, again, so that A, you can see what it is that you respond, take your own learning from the response to what will get you to a 10. But also so that whatever those responses are, to the degree that we can address them as a part of this webinar, we will strive to do so. So Rachel, what did we get back?
Oh, we're still responding, folks.
Oh,
We're
apologies.
still responding to the question. That's okay. I don't have any votes for what's the one thing that will get you to a 10? Oh, now they're rolling in.
Okay.
We do have a question,
Please.
which is on that scale. You know, how might you describe those different numbers? Someone asked.
You know, they can mean different things to different people, right? Some people will interpret a 10 as just wildly, blissfully happy. And that's fine if that's your interpretation, acknowledging that the likelihood you're going to actually be at a 10 for any prolonged period of time is probably going to be reduced. Other people are going to interpret a 10 as today is a good, productive day. Everything that I wanted to accomplish today has been accomplished. Everything I wanted to see for myself, I am seeing. I feel secure. I feel loved. I feel like I'm doing the things I enjoy doing in my work, in my personal life, and that's a 10. And there isn't a right or wrong answer to that necessarily. But whatever your scale, certainly if you're thinking about 10s only being when you're on a Scrooge McDuck-like pile of money and are just blissfully happy and so on, okay, that's fine, but you're probably not going to be there a whole lot, and let's just get comfortable with that. And it really boils down to sort of a interpretation versus frequency type conversation around it.
Great. And now folks have sent in answers. By far, the number one answer, 42%, is a new job.
Okay.
33% spending more time doing the things I enjoy or I'm best at. 9% being more challenged and engaged in my current position. 6% being more productive at work. 9% having more joy in my life.
Excellent. Okay. So I think we're going to really address a lot of what you guys are putting in there. Obviously, with this being Career Month, we're going to be talking about new work, engagement in work, finding joy in your work, so on and so forth. And so before I even get into the content, and I know we're doing a lot of stuff here on the front end, I just want to share a little bit of my story so that you can understand where this is coming from. I would sit in webinars or other sort of workshop type sessions, and I'd always, for myself, just be curious, like, who is that person and why should I be listening to them? So as a just quick background on myself, grew up here in the Chicagoland area, Evanston more specifically, where, as Rachel mentioned, I was a competitive classical pianist as a child, which meant I could type really fast, which then led me to sort of my first entrepreneurial venture, if you will, at the age of 12, where I started typing things up for people in the neighborhood. This was the dawning days of people having computers in their homes. So to have a 12-year-old kid, you could pay $8 or $10 an hour to type stuff up for you, and he would do it quickly, was really a boon to a lot of people. On my end, I'm 12 years old making $10 an hour, which buys a whole pile of candy. So I thought, hey, this was pretty cool. That very quickly led into my mouse isn't working, my monitor isn't working, can you fix it? And so I became a self-taught technologist. This then led to a variety of tech-based entrepreneurial ventures. My first one while I was in undergraduate at Northwestern University doing web development. In total, I've been a founder, co-founder, or early employee at a total of 14 startups over the course of my career, the most notable being a company by the name of eCopy, which I describe as if you ever walked up to a copier or scanner and sent an email from it, that was probably us. So that got acquired in 2009 while I was at University of Chicago pursuing my MBA. And after the acquisition and my MBA, I went and spent some time in the venture capital world. and very quickly realized I was not put on this earth to be a venture capitalist. Instead, I preferred to work more directly with the entrepreneurs, and that's what led to the founding of TandemSpring. Initially, TandemSpring was about working with entrepreneurs to gain venture capital and help them develop in that way, but very quickly it transitioned into coaching and entrepreneurial strengths-based leadership, because the feedback I kept receiving from people was, hey, thanks so much for the help in helping us raise our round or whatever it may be, but what really changed me, what really I found valuable, was that strengths-based approach, those questions you would ask me at 8 o'clock at night over Chinese takeout. And so that led me down the path of becoming a certified executive coach, and that's what I've been doing for the last few years. As a fundamental component to my coaching, the methodology that I use is what is known as a strength-based leadership methodology. Fundamentally, what does that mean? It means that most people spend a lot of time thinking about what's wrong. How can I improve in some way that I'm otherwise deficient? And don't spend nearly enough time thinking about all the things that they're already doing incredibly well and how those things can be leveraged more in the name of fixing problems, getting around obstacles, achieving more in a job, finding a better place for you within a workforce, so on and so forth. So for an agenda today, we really are going to cover 3 specific items. First, I'm going to spend some time trying to get your mind around this idea of using your personal strengths as a new foundation, moving away from this deficit orientation and instead focusing on what you already do well and how that can be leveraged. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm a University of Chicago grad myself. I fully appreciate that rose-tinted lenses and kumbaya is not going to go over real well with this crowd. I assure you there's going to be some data and there's going to be some evidence. We're going to talk about all the kind of University of Chicago type stuff behind strengths-based methodologies. It oftentimes does get painted with a brush of just, oh, happy-go-lucky. And there is a part of that that's true. But there's also an aspect of how do we bring that down into actually delivering results, having positive outcomes in our life, in our businesses. And so that's the second section we're going to talk about, using strengths to drive performance. And then the third area we're going to talk about is how do we take strengths on this individual level and aggregate them and understand them within the context of teams, within the context of an organization. Moreover, how can we optimize a team around a strengths-based methodology? So my first question to you is, have you had enough of deficit-oriented leadership? And I would challenge that by the fact that you are even on this webinar, at some level, that is true. There's something about the idea of strengths and strategy and action that attracted you to this webinar in the first place. And oftentimes that is because we know that a deficit-oriented leadership model has flaws in it. So we challenge you at TandemSpring to simply try on 100% personal strengths as a new foundation. At the very least, can you give me until 1 o'clock Central Time today, just for the next 45 minutes or so, to purely focus on your strengths. If you want to pick up the deficits once this webinar is done, you're welcome to do so if that's what's working for you. We're going to talk more about what all of that really means. But first, I also want to offer up that the path to radical transformation is often paved with simple truths. And to that end, I want to give 4 simple truths that are going to serve as sort of the bedrock of what we talk about for the remainder of this webinar. First, you already have a myriad of talents. You were born with them. For me, that was being able to play classical piano at a competitive level. I didn't necessarily do anything. I was born with an innate ability to do that rather well. And the second point, over time, I turned that talent into a strength. I invested in it, and it only got better. The third point is where a lot of people get a little bit more challenged, which is this idea that personal strengths are the best foundation for your individual brand of leadership. In other words, rather than focusing on all the things that you do wrong and trying to address them and get your C's up to B's, can we instead focus on the A's that you already have, turn them into A++, and leverage those as a brand of leadership? The last point is related to this. You can only hope to be a second-rate version of someone else. But you're the only person who can be a first-rate version of you. Your talents, your strengths are completely unique unto you, and how you express them are informed by a lifetime of experience, be it cultural, regional, educational. All sorts of other things are informing how your individual talents, which you've developed into strengths, are expressed through your own individual form of leadership. And only you can do that. The trick is understanding that and presenting that as a valuable asset for yourself and for a potential employer if you're in the middle of a job search. So we're going to talk more about what that really means in just a minute. But before we do, I have a question for you. And that question is quite simply, what % of time do you spend focusing on your weaknesses? So we have a poll question there for you. Love to see you fill it out. And for a lot of people, the truth is darn near 100% of the time, they're going to focus on their weaknesses. So we're going to see what comes back here in just a minute. I don't want you to judge your answer too harshly. This is simply just a baseline. This is somewhere where we're going to start. And there is no real right or wrong. Again, so much of this is culturally informed, how we were raised, so on and so forth. So do we have results, Rachel?
We do. So we have 12% of the folks focus on their weaknesses less than 10% of the time. 33% of our answerees focus on their weaknesses about 10 to 25% of the time. 27% focus on weaknesses 25 to 50% of the time. 18% focus on weaknesses 50 to 75% of the time. And the lowest number, 9%, focus on weaknesses 75 to 100% of the time.
That's phenomenal. Those are some great numbers. I lower than what I normally get, which again is probably a function of the people who are attracted to come to the webinar in the first place. Again, I want to reiterate though, so much of this is what we're taught, how we're brought up. Again, as University of Chicago people, I'm going to guess your upbringing was very much like mine, which is that you would come home in the second grade or whatever, and your report card read A, 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 B. And your parents' response was probably something along the lines of, what the hell is going on with the B? Right? Ignoring all these accomplishments, that you got a top grade in 5 out of 6 courses, but that you got a still perfectly perfectly decent grade, but not the optimal grade in one particular class. And it really almost doesn't matter what that class was, right? I mean, maybe this was second grade history and you're an accountant now. Does the fact that you don't know who fought in the War of 1812 particularly salient to your accomplishments and your satisfaction and your achievement in your life as an accountant? Probably not. And so we're brought up in this mentality, and it's reinforced over and over and over again. And we're going to give a couple more examples as we go through. But if instead we can focus on our A's and learn how to leverage those, there's a lot of benefit that comes from it. So as I promised, I know this is a U of C crowd, so let's talk about some evidence that's out there for the value of focusing on strengths. People who have done strengths-based leadership work and used their strengths on a daily basis are 6 times as likely to be engaged at work. So that was one of the top answers to our poll question earlier. So if we can move this needle from being more deficit-oriented and weakness-oriented to more of a strengths-based lens, individual engagement in work increases because we find ways to use our strengths in our current work or in our future work. People who use their strengths are also 3 times as likely to have what they call an excellent quality of life, also known as joy. Another one of the top answers we received to our polling question just a couple of minutes ago. Next, 8% more productive in their role. This may not sound like a whole lot, 8%, but let me put it to you a different way. If you figure you're awake for at least 12 hours a day, 8% increase in productivity fundamentally means you get an extra hour in your day. If I could give you an extra hour every day, how much more stuff would you get done? How much happier would you be? How much more accomplished would you feel? And then last, 6 times as likely to do what they do best every day, which sounds a little soft. But let me draw your attention to the idea that when you do what you do best every day, there's a function of sustainability that is inherent to that. Let me explain. If I hired you today to do some awful, terrible, menial task, shoveling manure all day, 10-hour days, just shoveling, but I paid you exceedingly, I'll pay you $1 million a year to do it. You might be able to do that job for some period of time. You might be able to convince yourself that for the $1 million a year, it's worth enduring this otherwise terrible job. But at some point, that $1 million is going to matter less and less and less and less, and your disdain for the work is going to be greater and greater and greater. And that tipping point will occur. For some of us, it might be a day. For others, it might be a decade. But at some point, your ability to shovel manure for 10 hours a day for $1 million a year will no longer be sustainable. And it's not about the compensation, right? If I turn around at that point and say, oh, well, I'll make it $2 million. No, that's not going to be good enough. I can't bother to do this anymore. And what that boils down to is this idea that we need to be doing what we feel we are best at every day. We need to be doing work that we can be engaged in, find joy in, be productive in. And through that, that leads to sustainability. That leads to our ability to do work for an extended period of time. I know a lot of the people on this webinar right now are fairly young, fairly early on in their careers. And I know at some level there's a question of how in the world am I ever going to make it to retirement? I can't keep waking up and doing this for the next 30 or 40 years. This is where sustainability comes in. This is, again, is where a strengths-based approach brings such incredible value. So the author of one of the best-known strengths-based books, StrengthsFinders 2.0, a gentleman by the name of Tom Rath, has a great quote, which is, "The key to human development is to build on who you already are." In other words, not try and necessarily develop things that you are not already inherently good at. And hopefully by now I've convinced you in some of the value in having a strengths-based lens. So let's start getting into your individual strengths and how you can leverage them in your work, in your job search, in whatever it is you do or whatever comes next. So there's a number of strengths-based assessments that are out there. The best known is what was formerly known as StrengthsFinders. It's now called Clifton Strengths, after Donald Clifton, the psychologist behind the StrengthsFinder assessment. And we're going to be talking a lot about StrengthsFinders today as a model for understanding strengths, but I just want to be very clear. There are other options out there. The next most best known is one called VIA, which is free to take if you'd like to search for that. It's called VIA Character Strengths. StrengthsFinders is offered through Gallup. It's $20 to take and receive your top 5 strengths. You can pay to unlock the others. I wouldn't necessarily encourage that, certainly not as a first step. Start with your top 5. Again, it's about $20 and 30 minutes of your time. If you've taken it before, you may recognize some of these words in this little word cloud here at the bottom. If you haven't taken it, I would encourage you to do so. The output of the StrengthsFinders result are these words here at the bottom. There's 34 different strengths. We're going to talk about them. But the important thing about them is that they fall into 4 categories. There's 4 categories, and I'm just going to spend a moment here to walk through them, because at some level the titles of them are self-explanatory. But first we have the executing strengths. Executors are doers. They're the people who get stuff done. Next, we have influencing strengths. These are kind of your take charge people, people who love to stand up, speak their mind, make certain that they and or their teams' opinions, thoughts, feelings are heard, being acknowledged. Next, we have relationship building. So these are the interpersonal folk. They build strong relationships, and the language they have here is sort of this: the team's greater than the sum of its parts. I would also add to that they're sort of the glue that holds it all together and or the grease that helps everything move. And last, strategic thinking. This is your thinkers, ponderers, people who know how to take in a lot of data, absorb it, envision what could be. People who spend a lot of time kind of in their heads, if you will. And what I want you to do for just a moment is looking at these 4 domains. If you haven't taken the StrengthsFinders or other strengths-based assessments, just ask yourself, if you had to pick one, which of these is you? Which one of these is most you? What are you known for? Why do people value you in your workplace? Is it because you develop great relationships? Is it because of your incredible strategic thinking? Are you someone who just really gets stuff done or influences? Can you identify one that is the most salient for you? For those who might be struggling right now, I will open the aperture a little bit and allow you to select two. Please don't tell me you are equally awesome at all four of these, because you're not. Nobody is. You might be good at them all, but there's at least one into which you are particularly excellent. So focus on that. And remember the color of your circle here as we move to this next table. This is known as the periodic table of strengths. Couple of things to identify here. One, again, we have the color coordination. So we have our executing strengths on the left in green, influencing strengths in sort of the darker gray, relationship building in orange in the middle, and strategic thinking to the right in sort of the lighter gray. And within these, as you can see, there are the 34 different strengths that StrengthsFinders identifies, divvied up into these 4 domains. If you have identified a particular domain that you feel is a strengths center for you, you can now get a little bit more granular and see if any of these words, and I'm not going to spend the time to explain all of them to you, but without a doubt, on this call with University of Chicago type folk, we're going to have a lot of executors, we're going to have a lot of strategic thinkers. So within executing, the most common up at the top is achiever, right? Again, people who love to achieve, people who love to just check boxes on their to-do list, and they feel really, really good about getting stuff done. On the other side, we have strategic thinking, of which the most common, again, at the top is learner. These are people who just love to learn, love to take in information, develop new thoughts, find out new data. And the thing I want you to notice on this chart is the number in the top left-hand corner of each of the boxes is the frequency or commonness of the strength. So achiever in the top left there is the most common strength out of the 34 strengths. Command, if you look at the bottom 4 from the left, has the 34 on it. Command is the least common strength. So there isn't a consistency and frequency that we would expect across all of these strengths. Some are certainly more common than others. Executing and strategic thinking are some of the most common. Also, relationship building are very common as well. And as you identify your domain, as you identify the individual strengths that are most salient to you, this informs what is known as a strengths brand. So let me share mine. These are my top 5 strengths. So again, went on to Gallup's website, $20, 30 minutes. These were the results of my StrengthsFinder assessment. What we have is relator was actually my #1 strength. And as you can see, it's a relationship building strength. This was followed by strategic in the strategic thinking camp, command in the influencing camp, followed by ideation, again in the strategic camp, and then self-assurance in the influencing camp. So what does all that mean? Well, it means that when I wake up in the morning, my first thought is a relationship building thought. I roll over and grab my wife's hand and say, "Hey, honey, how'd you sleep? You know, how are you doing today?" Now, she is not a relationship builder, first and foremost. She actually spends a lot of time in her influencing, executing strengths. So that early on in our relationship really didn't go over particularly well. It was sort of, leave me the hell alone. That's not where my brain is. Why are you trying to relate to me right now? I'm just waking up. And so we had to find other ways to engage that allowed me to relate, and for her, her top strength is maximizer, for her to maximize. And so actually what we came to, interestingly enough, is I tend to wake up a little bit earlier, so I do more of the prep of her breakfast. And for me, it's a sign of love. I get to relate to her. And for her, it's an efficiency thing. Now she comes down and breakfast is there. She doesn't have to make it. It saved her a couple of minutes. That's maximizing. So she can receive it and I can give it. And we found ways to bring our individual strengths together as opposed to just having kind of more the traditional marital discord of, hey, honey, how you doing today? And, oh, it's too early. I haven't had my coffee. Leave me alone, right? So as we understand strengths, we can understand our individual presentation of them. So going back to my particular profile with these 5 as the top 5 strengths, I present myself as having a strengths brand of a relational innovation leader. As I shared with you, I've done a lot of startups, predominantly in tech, a lot of them really novel technologies, and oftentimes in leadership capacities. When I present that to people, it immediately informs them on how they can work with me better, what they can expect from me better, and inherently, I can find the places in the work for which I am best suited. As a relational innovation leader, you can tell right away that being cold with me as a coworker probably is not going to be really well received unless I can understand why. Similarly, if you tell me my idea for a new thing is just stupid, I'm going to particularly respond poorly to that because I identify with this strength as an innovation leader, rightly or wrongly. We can question if I actually am that innovative or not, but the point is I present myself that way. That is something I believe strongly about myself and is one of my strengths. And so it informs how you would work with me, what you should say, what you shouldn't, how to act. And as I understand it, it informs how I want to present myself. So consider these strengths that you identified either at the domain level or at the individual strength level, your unique combination that you can present as your unique brand. Another way to think about it is imagine you have a superhero cape. What goes on that superhero cape? How do you present yourself so other people understand you and you understand what you want to be putting out there through your work and through your engagement? A very famous civil rights leader and professor, Roger Wilkins, was quoted as, "The best hope of solving all of our problems lies in harnessing the diversity, energy, and the creativity of all our people." Right? It goes back to the same idea. What do you already have? How can we pull that out? How can we leverage it? And what I want to identify again, going back to my classical piano as a child, these talents, these strengths, are things that go way back. So for me as a relational innovation leader, that relational component, this is not something I learned at my last job. This is not something I learned at University of Chicago. This is not even something I learned in college or high school. This goes all the way back to my toddler days, right? When I and a bunch of other small children were playing in the playground, I was naturally talented at relationship building. Now, was I as good at it then as I am now? Of course not. But this is something that goes all the way back, and the same is true for you. If you identify strategic thinking as your strengths domain, when did you become a good strategic thinker? My guess is it's not all that recently. So most of you are probably familiar with Malcolm Gladwell and his idea of 10,000 hours. And some of you may be familiar with research that's come out in the last couple of years that claim to debunk it and so on and so forth. Regardless of where you stand on this idea of 10,000 hours, there is no debate that if you take a talent and you invest in it, it becomes stronger. And so for our vernacular, we're going to look at talents with investments become strengths. And with strengths comes the ability to provide consistent, high-level performance. So I have a very simple yes-no question for you, which is, quite frankly, are you an expert? And people are going to interpret this question in different ways, right? Again, so much of what we're told is that we are not expert, or at least not expert enough. If we are not a top person in our field, how could we possibly be an expert, right? That is certainly one interpretation of it. And an alternative interpretation is not so much oriented around the what you do, but the how you do it. So Rachel, what were our results from the expert question?
61% said yes, I'm an expert. 39% said no.
I'm delighted. I am delighted because that is far higher than normally get for affirmative responses to that question, because I would challenge that every single person on this call is in fact an expert. If we interpret expert as a manner of how, not what. So a lot of you may be familiar with Simon Sinek's starting with why. I won't go into it, but essentially he lays out that there are whats, hows, and whys. Strengths are your hows, right? Again, I may not be the single greatest accountant in the world. There's someone else always who is going to be better at accountancy than I am. But if I understand my hows, if I understand that I am a great relationship builder, I'm a great executor, I'm a great strategic thinker, and understand how to bring that into a strengths brand, then I am an expert in accountancy in this way. Nobody can do accountancy the way I do it. And if I understand what that how I do it component is, and am able to express that, am able to impress upon other people the importance of that, and am able to live into that consistently with a strengths-based mentality that I approach my work with, then that is the unique value. That is the differentiator that I have from other accountants. Maybe 1 in a million, I am the single greatest accountant in the world. But more likely than not, I bring a unique set of strengths to the how I do accountancy. That is my unique value. That's why I'm a valuable person. That's why you should engage with me. That's what I'm bringing to the table with my accounting practice, with my role as an accountant. And when we focus on strengths, it gives us the answers to how to resolve a problem, right? The reason why we go to deficit orientations is we go, oh my gosh, there's a problem, I need to fix it. And specifically around leadership, there's oftentimes some reason why you're not ready for that promotion, not ready to be a leader, not ready, whatever. The best example I can give of this is so many people are told that they can't be a leader because they don't know how to present at a level that motivates other people. They're not that influential when they go up on a stage. And I would throw out there that there's a gentleman by the name of Elon Musk who is an incredibly successful leader who is really rather terrible when it comes to presenting. It's not a matter of you have to do it this way. Yes, lots of leaders in big fancy titled roles are good presenters, but that is not the only way to get it done. There's plenty of other ways. And so as Donald Clifton, again, the psychologist behind Clifton Strengths or Strength Finders, says, what happens when we start to think about what is right with people rather than fixing what is wrong? What happens when you start looking at all the things you do great instead of trying to address your deficits, trying to get your C's into B's? So I'm going to transition quickly. We're slowly but surely running out of time here, but I want to transition quickly into how this applies to teams. Where do you sit on a team? How can teams leverage this sort of thinking? Well, the value in doing so is very similar to at the personal level, right? There's going to be greater work engagement, increased communication and clarity, trust and chemistry, right? If I'm presenting authentically who I am and what I do best, trust and chemistry naturally follows. Authenticity and confidence at work, right? I'm able to present what I find salient about myself, what I find valuable about myself. That's going to bring a wide range of benefits, including innovation and what we call productive conflicts. Right? Productive conflict is this idea that we try and avoid conflict at work really at all costs in many cases. But if we can understand that I'm an achiever, so I really like to do things, and you're a relator, and you really like to relate to people, that there's a natural tension that's going to form. I'm going to think you're going to come over to my cube and try and relate to me, and I'm trying to achieve, and you're just a distraction. Why don't you go do some work, right? So now you're lazy and don't get stuff done. But on the flip side, you look at me and go, wow, what a jerk. I don't like him. He never wants to talk. He never wants to hang out or have a coffee, right? That is an unproductive conflict that is forming. If instead we understand I'm achiever, you're relator, when you come over, I go, hey, I know you're relating. I get that's what you do right now. Maybe it's a good time, maybe it's not. And on the flip side, you can interpret, hey, Tomer's just trying to achieve because he's that achiever guy, right? And as we understand each other, there's more productivity that can occur within the conflict. If the conflict even happens in the first place, as in my example, it probably diffuses it altogether. But then when we do engage in an actual conflict, an actual difference in opinion, we understand the lens through which it's coming. And that inherently is going to lead to more productive conversations, to greater chances of innovation. So let me give you an actual example. This is a team we worked with. It was a regional team in the largest US market for the organization, and it was really struggling with performance. And when we took Strength Finders, these were the results. And again, you have your 4 domains of executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And what stood out is that the leader of this group is this individual in the light blue. And you'll see that there's 4 boxes in the executing domain. So here is this person who leads, who's heavily execution oriented. But meanwhile, the remainder of the team orients more around relationship building and strategic thinking. We could get into a conversation as to why this is good or bad or whatever, but what was fundamentally happening is you had a leader who was very outcomes oriented. What have we done? Show me the data. Get it done. And you had a team that wanted to relate and do strategic thinking and so on and so forth. And so what we did after we identified this sort of disconnect in strength, modus operandi, measures of success. So now the team could operate in its that, and understanding that by doing so, the executing outcomes that the leader was looking for will naturally follow. And so what they did is they actually created augmented annual review structures that still had the business outcomes that the executing leader was looking for, but also incorporated relationship building and strategic thinking measures against which the team now had to perform, because they understood that by achieving those milestones, the business and outcomes and executing milestones will naturally follow. And so I would challenge you to consider that leadership has less to do with how far up a corporate ladder you can climb, your title, if you're an SVP or a C whatever O, and has far more to do with how far you can walk into your own soul, to present your strengths, to be an authentic version of yourself. And when we live in the fullness of our strengths, a lot of things start changing in our world, right? There's no success and failure. It's just an evolution of becoming a better you. Your unique combination of the top 5 strengths can and will shift over time. As you find in new places and new roles, you should be developing new strengths. Interestingly, any strength gone too far can be a weakness. Again, that example of the achiever who just loves getting stuff done. If all they're doing is achieve, there isn't a strategy there. There's nothing relationship building there. It's not influential. All those other things are going out the window. So it can go too far. And last, but probably most important, we cannot expect people to fully understand us if we are not bringing all of our strengths to the game. If we don't know what we do well, if we are not presenting that authentically, we can't be surprised when we feel that people don't get us. So harp on your strengths. Bring all of yourself, head, heart, and guts, to your job. If you're in a job search, to your job search. Be unapologetic about the things that you already do incredibly, awesomely well. So if you would like to get deeper on this, we have created a website for you at tandemspring.com/uchicago. You can download our ebook there. We've redefined some corporate terminology for you so that you can work to kind of reorient from what we call the corporate mindset, or this deficit-oriented leadership methodology that so many of us operate under, and give you some tips on how to kind of get to the brighter side, a more strengths-based approach to your work. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I thank you so much for your time and for joining me on this webinar. I'm so glad to have played a role in being part of your journey into strengths and into that authentic presentation of yourself as a leader. So thank you again, and we'll open it up to some questions.
Yeah, a couple folks said they lost some sound when you were explaining the slide about how to best use strengths to work with a team, and wonder if you could give a briefer summary of that since they lost some of the sound.
For sure. Essentially, let me pull that slide back up. Essentially, what we had here was a disconnect of an executing leader and a relationship building and strategic thinking team. And so the executing leader kept looking for specific outcomes. They wanted to see execution, which is fine. It's a business. It should have those milestones and measures. But the way this team is going to get to those measures is through relationship building and through strategic thinking. That's what they are best at. So what they did is reoriented their measures for success to not just have the executing outcomes that the leader was looking for, but also to include relationship building and strategic thinking measures that were salient and important to the team. And in doing so and allowing those to be measures of success, the team can operate in its strengths better, and those business executing oriented outcomes naturally follow.
Wonderful. I'm seeing that some of our folks are saying they need to get going. I know we have lots of great questions. So I might encourage folks, you could send your questions on to me, and I can make sure they get connected to Tomer, and we can get you some answers. And I want to thank you all for attending this University of Chicago Alumni Association Career Month programming. And I hope you'll check out more of our webinars. We're having many this month. In November, we're having a total of 16. So I hope that you'll check out more of those, either the videos of them or live. And thank you all again so much for attending. And I again want to thank Tomer for joining us and offering this wonderful presentation. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.